I am Anuranjani K, Assistant Professor in Department of Computer Science and Engineering in Bharat Institute of Higher Education and Research. I am going to take about the course Object-Oriented Programming in C++. The topic we are going to cover is about procedural versus object-oriented programming and its key features. So the outline of the topic is about procedural programming, object-oriented programming, comparison between procedural and object-oriented programming, and the key features of object-oriented programming. These are the four topics we are going to cover in today's session. So first, before going inside the procedural programming and object-oriented programming, we need to see about the programming paradigms. So the programming paradigms can be split into imperative programming paradigm and declarative programming paradigm. What do you mean by an imperative programming paradigm? It uses statements that changes a program's state. These are known as imperative programming paradigm. And the procedural programming and object-oriented programming both comes under the imperative programming paradigm. Next is a declarative programming paradigm. What do you mean by a declarative programming paradigm? It's that a program that expresses the logic of a computation without describing its control flow. It's known as your declarative programming paradigm. So in order to read about the control flow of the programs, we have scheduled two more types of programming from declarative programming paradigms. It is known as functional programming and database programming. So these are the two types of programming paradigms from which the procedural programming and the object-oriented programming are being derived. First one, procedural programming. So we need to know about what do you mean by procedural programming. So it is defined as a model from which a derived structured programming. So based on the structure of a programming model has been derived and the concept has been implemented, which are called as procedures. So the procedures, which can also be named as routines, subroutines, or functions, can say about the step-by-step process that have been carried out inside our programming language. So the whole programming language, whatever you are going to implement, its step-by-step process can be denoted as procedures. Next point is about a program's execution. So during a program execution, we all know that a procedure will be called in order to execute a program. So the procedures can be called by itself, or also it can be called the other procedures also. So such types of procedures are known as procedural programming. So the procedure programming is defined after all these points has been summarized to a set of instructions that have been telling a computer to do step by step on performing the code. So if we have a set of statements or a list of instructions given in a program which are denoted as functions or procedures or commands or routines or even subroutines. So in any name, a procedures can be called. So these are the things which are included for our procedural programming. So a step-by-step process which helps us to execute a program is known as procedural programming. So the languages that are using the procedural programming are Fortran, Algol, COBOL, BASIC, Pascal, and C. In these all programming languages, we are familiar with our C programming language, which are called as a procedural programming language. This is a example flowchart how a procedural programming works. So this is a representation of a procedural programming flowchart with an example like you're going to look for an object. So that black dot is considered to be a person. That person is going to look out for an object now. So we are looking for an object. So if an object has been found, Yes, we have to approach the object. If not, the object is denoted as a mobile phone in this flowchart for an example. So it's battery low. Either you keep the phone aside or either you recharge that phone and again you can look for the object. So the loop goes as well. So if you have approached the object, your hand will be empty. So you have to grasp the object and get home as soon as possible from wherever you are, or else hand over the object to someone else. So it's a step-by-step process. That's what is implemented in this flowchart, and that's what this flowchart explains about the procedural programming. So we saw a flowchart where it represents a procedural programming, a step-by-step process. How we are going to handle an object and search for object. After searching an object, what will be done? So it's a step-by-step process. That's how a flowchart has been given for us. Now we have to see the structure of the procedure-oriented program. Structure is that how your programming language will be built using your procedural programming. So first one is your main program. Your main program is, for example, we'll be using a main function. Inside the main functions only be used to declare variables, data types, etc., etc. So that is considered to be the main program. From the main program, we'll be having various functions or procedures. This function 1, function 2, function 3. These three functions are said as procedures. Okay, so from main program, we are having the three procedures or three functions, which is a step-by-step process. From these functions, it can call other functions also. As we recall to our previous slides, we cannot know that the procedures can call itself or it also can call other procedures. In such way, a function can call itself or it can also call other functions in order to complete the step-by-step process of the program. So function 1, function 2, and function 3 are the sub-functions of a main program or procedures or a step-by-step process. From this, these functions can also call other functions like function 4 and function 5. From again, function 4 and function 5 can also call other procedures like function 6, function 7, and function 8. So the function 2 can also call function 7. Same way, function 5 calls function 7 and function 8, only if it is needed. This structure denotes that a main program can have how many procedures as possible at once. The procedures can call itself or it can also call other procedures in order to complete the execution of the program. So after having these many functions and procedures in our programs, we have to concentrate on developing the functions slash procedures of our program. So, and also when we concentrate on these procedures, we have to also think about the data as well. So, and also we have to denote about how the data is affected or not, whether we use the data is has been a private or a public data. So in a multifunction program, many important data items are placed as global so that they may be accessed by all the functions. That is what I denoted as public and private. So when we are going to call, as I said, we will be calling procedures by itself or can also call other procedures. When a procedure is procedure 1 is going to call procedure 2, it must be able to access the data of procedures 2. So in procedure 2, we'll be having certain global data which will be used by procedure 1. So these data are accessible by any other procedures outside the program also. So it is said to be that each function is as its own local data also, which cannot be shared by other functions. Now we have to denote the data and functions in procedural language. So we'll be having global data. Global data, as we said, they can be accessed by other functions. And we'll be having three functions like function 1, function 2, and function 3. Then for each function, function 1 we have a local data, for function 2 we have a local data, and for function 3 we have a local data. So there have been two sets of global data and three functions with as its own local data by itself. So the global data is shared to function 1, function 2. Same way, another set of global data has been shared to function 2 and function 3. But each of the all the both the global data can be shared by everyone, function 1, 2, and 3. And same way, other global data can also be shared by function 1, 2, and 3. So the global data has no restrictions while we are used in our programs, like it cannot be restricted. So global data is considered to be more vulnerable because it's public and it can be accessed by any procedures outside the original program itself. So in a large program, it is also said that it is very difficult to identify what data is used by which function. So the procedural-oriented program does not model the real-world problems very well. This is because the functions are always action-oriented. Next, we are going to see about the characteristics of POP. The POP is nothing but your procedure-oriented programming. First one is about emphasis. So emphasis as doing things is nothing about writing algorithms for your procedures. And second one, the large program. When we go out to the procedural programming language, the characteristics of procedural programming language is that it is a step-by-step process. So when you are going to implement a step-by-step process, it includes a very large program which has a large sets of instruction sets to be implemented for an execution. So we have to divide it into smaller programs known as functions. So the most functions share the global data as we saw in the previous slide. The data will be moved openly around the system from function to function. The employees top-down approach in the program design. For example, we'll be using void main. Then we'll have to declare the data. Then we'll be declaring the variables, etc., etc. Then comes the procedures, functions, methods, etc., etc. So these things have been in a top-down approach in our procedural programming language. Let's go to the disadvantages of our POP. The data is exposed to the whole program, so no security for data is. As I said, the global data are very vulnerable to the procedural programming language. So there is no security of our data here. Next one, it is difficult to relate with the real world objects. That is, separate data and functions have been implemented. So it is very difficult for us to relate it with the real world objects. Third point, importance is given to the operation on data rather than the data. That is, we are going to speak only about the action and not the action itself. So what action is performed, the importance is given to them and not about that data. Importance is not at all given. Then it increases the complexity when the program gets large, because even though we divide a larger program sets into a smaller programs using the procedures, we cannot also implement many procedures inside a single program to execute it in a step-by-step process, because the procedures get lengthy, so as the global data also gets lengthy. As far as the no security for data has been concerned, the program becomes vulnerable to the world. A change in global data may necessitate rewriting all the functions that access that item. So whenever we change the global data, we have to go back to our program and change and access all the procedures and all the functions that have been written in the program, because a single change in a place will affect the whole set of program in the procedural programming language, because all the step-by-step process, it's been a loop. One step is connected to the other. Same way, even though we divide it into smaller programs, each function is linked to the other function. So we don't emphasize on what to do to solve a problem. That's the final disadvantage of procedural programming language. And as I said, when we are going to modify a data in a global data, it is going to be difficult as we need to rewrite certain process and functions again. So it is difficult to modify a program in middle of a situation. So a simple C program, for example, to know about the procedural programming language. So this is your program, which include stdio.h, which is considered as your header file. Int main, that is your main function. Then we have a printf statement which prints the output that has been given inside the quotes in the single braces, which is denoted as hello world. Then we are having a return value 0. So what does this program say you? We have to note that there is no class at all in this program. It's a step-by-step process in this program. Second, it has a main method. Third, and other methods could be written, but it's not written. So these are the three main things that have been denoted in this simple C program. And our output is just simply hello world with exclamatory mark, what is given inside the printf statement. Now we move on to our object-oriented programming. So what do we mean by object-oriented programming? The object means like a real entity word, such as a pen, book, chair, table, pad, etc., etc. So it's a real word entity which can be implemented in our programming language. So it is a methodology, that is, or a paradigm to design a program using classes and objects. As we saw in a previous example, we said there is lack of class in the procedural programming. So we are going to implement our program using classes and objects. That is, you are going to divide or split your program using your classes and objects in order to overcome the disadvantages of the procedural programming language. It simplifies the software development and maintenance by providing some concepts. So the object, or as I said, is a real word entity. So it always holds the information about the state and behavior. To know about more about objects, we have to know about what is state and what is the behavior. States. States are the characteristics of an object. That is, it usually takes a form of its descriptors. So as I said, state objects are nothing but a real word entity such as pen, chair, or table. So an object is nothing but it is a word entity, that is a whole form of entity. So the words used should be have to take the form as a descriptive object, that is known as a state. And behavior is what that object can do, what a pen can do, what a chair can do. That those are not called as the behavior of an object. So the object holds about the state and the behavior. State is nothing but what the objects are, and behaviors are nothing but what the objects can do. So these are the simple level explanation for an object. So objects are said to that it takes up space in memory. Then they have an associated address like record in Pascal or in a structure or union in C. So that's why they have been not used in the procedural language, and it has been well used in our object-oriented programming language. So this will be the representation of our object-oriented programming language. First, we have the object. As I said, it takes a space in a memory and have an associated address. So from object, we will be moving on to property and method. The property is about attribute or state, and method can be called as a function or a procedure. So these things comes under the representation of our object-oriented programming. So the properties like variables are considered to be the state, and methods are considered to be our behavior. So the inside an object, what all we have? A state and a behavior. That state can be considered as a property, and that method can be considered as our behavior. So when a program is executed, the objects interact by sending messages to one another. So what are classes and objects? What are classes and objects? The classes and objects are the two main aspects of object-oriented programming. So the class, it is a user-defined data type which holds its own data members and the member functions, which can be accessed and used by creating an instance of that class. A class, it is a user-defined data type which holds its own data members and member functions. And it also can be accessed by creating the instance of a class. So what do you mean by data members here? The data members are denoted as data variables, and the member functions are the procedures that have been used for manipulating the variables, and together they form the properties and behavior of the objects in a class. A class can also be represented like a blueprint for an object. Now, what do you mean by an object? An object is an identifiable entity with some characteristics and behavior. So an object is an instance of a class. When a class is defined, no memory is allocated, but when it is instantiated, the memory is allocated. For example, we consider that a class named vehicle has been given. So the object can be bicycle. So the representation will be like, first one will have an object, and inside that object will be having methods which can be public, so that the other objects can access those methods. And we have the private methods and the private data which are only exclusive for the its own object, and the interaction interface with the other objects can be occurred only using the public methods. As we saw in the example, class vehicle and object bicycle, this will be represented as object is known as your bicycle. The properties are as gear, pedal, and speed, whereas the objects method is like we are going to apply brakes, changing it. This is the action or the procedures. That is the behavior. The gear, pedal, and speed are the properties, and the properties are a state, and applying brakes, changing gears are the methods, or we are going to say it about the behavior. So sample code. So we are having a class person. In that person, we'll be having a person's name and a person ID. The name has been denoted in the array format for us for a character name array 20. That character is denoted as a data type, and int ID is given as the public void get details. Now our main function is a person P1. What's P1? P1 is a object. The P1 is a variable is considered as an object because class name is person. Class person. We have denoted as class person, where class name is person, and that person is going to declare an object, whereas P1 is identified as an object. Now, we are going to move on to the comparison between the procedural programming language and the object-oriented programming language. So one side is our procedural programming and another side is our object-oriented programming. In procedural programming, it is divided into small parts called functions. As I said, the length of the program has been divided. Whereas in object-oriented programming, the program is divided into small parts called as objects. Next point is, it's a top-down approach, it's a bottom-up approach. Procedural programming's main functions comes at the top, whereas object-oriented programming main functions comes at the bottom. There are no other specifier in procedural programming, whereas we have lot of other specifiers like private, public, and protected, like etc. in our object-oriented programming. Since there are no other specifiers, we can address global data and only local data have been used in our procedural programming, whereas in object-oriented programming, we'll be using private, public, and protected, etc. for the length of our program and also the security for our program. We are adding new function and data is not at all easy in our procedural programming language, whereas when you're going to modify the program in object-oriented programming, it is very easy to do an modification in OO programming. The procedural programming does not have any proper way for adding data. so it is less secure. Whereas object-oriented programming provides data hiding, so it is more secure. The function is more important than data in procedural, and data is more important than function in object-oriented programming. These are certain sets of comparison or the differences between our procedural and object-oriented programming. So this is a simple diagrammatic explanation for procedural versus object-oriented programming. In procedural programming, we won't be able to see what's happening exactly. The withdraw, deposit, transfer, etc. are only functions. The data has not been clear. Whereas in object-oriented programming, the data is clear: customer, money, and account. Whereas in procedural, only the actions have been shown, like withdrawal, deposit, and transfer. So this is the differences between procedural and object-oriented programming. Now we are going to see about the key features of the object-oriented programming. So certain key features are for object-oriented programming. Oops, is that object, class. The object and the class, we have already seen about what we mean by an object and what do you mean by a class in our previous slides. And still 4 more key features are encapsulation, abstraction, polymorphism, and inheritance. These are the key features of our object-oriented programming, which helps us to differentiate between our procedural programming language. First one is abstraction. In abstraction, the abstraction can be defined like hiding the internal details and showing the functionality. That is what I showed in the diagrammatic representation of procedural versus group, where we have hide the internal details and the functionality alone is shown. That is known as abstraction. So data abstraction is to visible only the necessary information. Unnecessary information will be hidden from the outside world. This can be done by making class members as public and private members of the class. That is by using as a specifier, which are mainly done in our object-oriented programming. Abstraction can be implemented. So the private members can be accessed only within the same class where they are declared. In abstraction, we can also see about abstraction using classes. So the class helps us to group the data members and the member functions using the available access specifiers. A class can decide which data will be visible to the outside world and which is not. Next, abstraction can also be used using the header files. So we have considered the POW method to represent the math.h header file. So when we need to calculate the power of a number, we simply call the function POW present in the math.h header file and pass the number of arguments without knowing the underlying algorithm according to which the function is actually calculating the power of the numbers. So this is the data abstraction and this is the process abstraction. So in data abstraction, the user program it's not shown, whereas private, public, and public. So the data abstraction from the names and the strings and the ID values have all been extracted in the data abstraction. Whereas in process, they are taking the methods, that is the behavior of a class as another object has been taken. That is known as a process abstraction. So for this, we have to consider a real life example, like a man is going to drive a car. So the man only knows that pressing the accelerator will increase the speed of the car or applying the brake will stop the car. But he does not know how an accelerator works, the speed actually, and also he does not know the inner mechanism of how the accelerator or the brake has been implemented. This is known as the abstraction. Next, we'll be going on to encapsulation. For encapsulation, you have to think about a capsule, like a medicine capsule. So first, one half of the medicine capsule is considered as the class, and another half is going to be considered as the methods. If you see in a capsule, we'll be having tiny objects inside the capsule in order like a medicine. which are going to inhale it. So these are considered as the tiny objects inside the methods, and these tiny objects inside the methods are called as the variables. So this whole capsule is called as the encapsulation. So one half of the capsule is called as the class, another half is known as method, and inside that methods we have the variables, and the whole set of this capsule is considered as the encapsulation. So this method has been denoted as binding or wrapping code and data together into a single unit, that is class and data. So we have a single unit only, that is a single capsule. So it is denoted as an encapsulation. So it's a process of wrapping data members and member functions inside a single unit. And single unit is denoted as the class. Using the method of encapsulation, the programmer cannot directly use the data. The data is only accessible through the object of the class. Before going to polymorphism, let us consider some real-time example for an encapsulation. So, in encapsulation, we consider a company. In a company, there are different sections like accounts, finance, sales, etc., etc. In finance section, the finance section handles only the financial transactions and keeps all record and data related to finance. Similarly, for the sales, only sales related records will be there. So now there may be a situation for some reason or an official information where the finance section needs the data about the sales and the sales section needs data about the finance. In this case, he is not allowed to directly access the data of the sales section. He will first have to contact the other officer in the sales section and then the request him to give the particular data. This is what encapsulation is about. Here we use the sales section on the employees and we can manipulate them the wrapped data under a single name called the sales section. So this is a real-time example for encapsulation. And next one is the polymorphism. So polymorphism. What do you mean by polymorphism? The polymorphism can be segregated into two ways. That is, one is during compile time and another one is in runtime. From the compile time, we can furthermore get about function overloading and operator overloading. And in the runtime, we have about the virtual functions. So these are the places where polymorphism have been implemented. So when one task is performed in different ways, it is known as polymorphism. So polymorphism means more than one function with the same name with a different working. It can be static or dynamic. So in static polymorphism, the memory will be allocated at compile time, whereas in both function overloading and the operator overloading are considered to be the examples of static polymorphism, that is compile time polymorphism. In dynamic polymorphism, the memory will be allocated at the runtime. So the virtual function is an example for dynamic polymorphism. So operator overloading. Operator overloading is a type of static polymorphism or a compile time polymorphism. So the process of making an operator to exhibit different behaviors in different instances is known as operator overloading. Function overloading. But the function overloading is using a single function name to perform different types of tasks. So we are going to use function name as a single name, but we have different types of tasks which end up in the same function name. That is known as function overloading. The polymorphism is extensively used in implementing the inheritance feature. So let's consider a person at the same time can have different characteristics, like a man at the same time is a father, and an employee at the same time can have many types of characteristics. So this is called as polymorphism. So now we're going to example for a polymorphism. That is, we are going to write a function to add some integers. That is, sometimes with 2 and sometimes with 3. we are going to use the addition method here. So this is how your code looks when you're going to implement. So we have a main function where we have used sum1 and sum2. Sum1 and sum2 are the declared variables for the integers what we are going to use. As you see the gray box, it consists of int sum, int a comma int b. That is, sum is the function name. Again you have a int sum, that the same function name in the yellow box with int a, b and c. This is 2 and that is 3. These both are implemented in a single function, single program. That is like sum1 and sum2 finally. So this is known as polymorphism. And then we are going to see about the inheritance. So for defining an inheritance is nothing but we casually say that a child has inherited the character of a parent. So the parent comes inside the base class and the child comes within the derived class. So whenever the properties or the characteristics that have been derived from the base class is called as the derived class. So only one class is derived from one base class. One object acquires all the properties and behaviors of parent object. It is known as inheritance. It provides code reusability. It is used to achieve runtime polymorphism. The class who is going to provide its features to another class will be called as the base class. And the class who is using the properties and features of another class will be called as the derived class. So this is the example of the polymorphism. We have subclass. The class that inherits the properties from another class is called subclass or derived class. Superclass. The class whose properties are inherited by subclass is called base class or the superclass. So the polymorphism in inheritance, it supports the concept of reusability. That is, we are going to reuse the same procedures or methods that have been given inside the base class, which will be inherited and be used by the subclasses or your derived classes. Thank you. This is all about the today's topic. Let's meet in the next session with another topic. Thank you.